They had one on, you'd watch both eardrums going that way.
So it's pretty
That's,
loud. It's just like when the young people go to a concert and they stand in front of those boom boxes. A lot of them are not cognitively aware that they can blow out their hearing, nor when they go into, say, a restroom, that has a hand dryers where you put your hands
they're
underneath it.
loud.
They've been tested as loud as 120 decibels. And they can even blow out babies' hearing because babies hear starting at 16 weeks. So we've talked about grief with getting hearing loss. And I do know a little bit about Kubler-Ross. So thanks for bringing that up, because anytime you lose something, in fact, even right now going through the pandemic, a lot of people are going through a lot of adjustments. So that might be something, if you've got a hearing loss or if you want a direct path for grieving, then perhaps you can get Dr. Neal's book on this particular topic. I'm sure he covers it in detail. I'm looking at him on a Zoom call right now as we're doing the podcast, and I see all kinds of books behind there. And I know he's writing a couple of books as well now too. So what would be a number 2 tip in reference to if you're successfully living with hearing loss, or a key?
Okay, well, so if we've gone through the grieving process and that's all done, then the next step, what I call key number 2, is learning how to deal with your hearing loss the right way. And most people don't realize this, but most hard of hearing people use what should I call bad coping strategies. And the reason for it is really interesting, is because we are emotional beings. And so we look for emotional solutions rather than, let's call them practical or real solutions. So for example, say I'm not hearing you. Well, and so I ask you to speak up, and you speak up for the proverbial 7 seconds, and then you forget about it and you drop your voice, because we speak with our voices running on autopilot.
Right.
And so we just have a standard level that we speak at. And so we forget, especially if you're a speaker and you're talking to a group, you're thinking about what you've got to say next. You're not thinking about that person, you forget. So you ask me again. You put your hand up, let's say we're in a class or something. Sir, I can't hear you. I'd say, sorry. And I speak up for another 7 seconds, and then it drops down. Now, what are you going to do next? 7 seconds later, you can't hear. Are you going to put your hand up a 3rd time? You see, you're starting to get embarrassed. You're feeling emotional. It's the emotions that are driving you. And so you don't want to call attention to yourself. And so from then on, you just give up and sit there and glassy-eyed stare, and that's it. You don't know what's going on. Whereas a better way is to find a practical solution. What one guy did is he had what looked like a table tennis paddle, and on one side, he had really big, bold letters, please speak up. And then on the other side, he had thank you. and so
That's creative.
So he would tell the speaker beforehand, he said, I can't hear. I need you to speak up or speak slower. You can have different messages. Slow down or speak clearer or whatever. But what he would do is he'd say to the speaker, now, I know that you have a regular speaking voice and you'll forget about me. So would it be okay if I just went along and held my paddle up when I miss something, so that you remember to speak louder or clearer or slower, or whatever? And then when he does, he just goes along and flips it to the thank you and then puts it down. But you see, that draws attention to yourself, especially if you're like me, that's always sitting very near the front. Everybody in the room sees me with this paddle going up, wonders what's going on, and you could be self-conscious. And so we have to learn how to not run on our emotions, but run on what actually works.
So be more assertive then.
Well, that is another thing. Well, you've got to, because if you're passive, because you can only deal with your hearing loss, we'll call it, in three ways, three basic ways. The first one is to be passive. You just sit back and you won't even say to the speaker, "Sir, I can't hear you," but you're sure hoping that somebody else is going to do that. You know, that's passive. And you just sit there quietly and miss everything. In other words, you put your needs of everybody else ahead of your own.
Right.
And then there's the opposite to the passive person, is the aggressive person. And they are the one that jumps up. "Hey, you idiot, speak up. I can't hear." And, you know, and they may not be nice about it, but they put their needs ahead of everybody else's. And that's just as wrong. And sometimes passive people will take it for a long time, and then all of a sudden they've held it in, then they just blow up, and then they're aggressive, and you don't want that. What you want is to be assertive, where you put your needs and everybody else's needs at the same level, and then the two of you have to work together to mutually come up with a way that will meet both sets of needs. And that's what we.
Yeah, one of the things that I've used in the past is what I call the 5-finger method, and so if I need a speaker, and I've done the same thing, I have actually, on my website, there is a reserved seating sign. So before I go to a conference, I let them know that I'm hard of hearing or hearing impaired. And that's another topic that we can talk about.
We can't talk about hearing impaired. No, I got to tell you about this one.
Okay, go ahead.
The definition of a hearing impaired person is a person who was caught drunk driving and had normal hearing. That's hearing impaired. We are hard of hearing because hearing is hard. We struggle to understand. So I love the term hard of hearing, but the politically correct one, of course, is a person with hearing loss.
Well, actually, in the HR world, so in the working world, they still use hard of hearing. So that in the United States, that's still that classification. With the 5-finger method, you simply raise your thumb to let the speaker know they need to go up or they need to go down. So even if you're on a 1-to-1, and then, the sign language thing, I tell them I'm going to say thank you in this way to let them know that they're doing a good job. And equally so, if somebody's talking too fast, I can't often understand them. So I simply go like this to let them know that I'm a cop. I'm a hearing cop. I'm going to let them know that they need to slow it down so that I can catch what they're saying. And I do agree that it needs to be where we kind of work together. And the medical, I know the deaf, and my own aunt is deaf, but I know the deaf really despise the word hearing impaired. And they really dislike that. I've had some of the younger generation recently tell me, well, hard of hearing sounds so old, old fashioned. And I'm like, well, okay, but that's still the legal definition. And I love your way of explaining it. So that was new for me. So thank you for that. I know that term was created back in 1969 with the ADA law. So I know that's where it came from. Because that's how the definition that the deaf gave those of us who have a mild to profound hearing loss. So that's how that was classified. But equally so, I would like to come up with a new term, which is totally out in left field somewhere, but it's hearific and terrific, to try to empower people with hearing loss, because in the medical field, if you've got anything that's not working well, it's classified as impaired, so that's one of the things I have struggled with, because I don't really like the word hearing impaired either. So I like your thing about it's a hearing person that is not driving well. So what's your number 3 clue or tip or key?
Okay. The third key, we just moving on. I got to keep them in the order that they've got them in the book here, and then we can after we've got the emotionally we're squared away for hearing loss and we're doing things right. Then the third one that I use is to use all the simple and free hearing loss coping strategies. And like the simplest one is get close to the person. If you're standing 10 feet from me and talking to me, I'm not hearing a sound from your voice. I'm just going to be lip reading you. If you want to get close, then I'm got so much better chance. And the reason for that, there's a really good reason, is most of the intelligibility of speech is in the high frequencies. But most people that have a hearing loss in the high frequencies. So they don't hear the high frequency components of speech. Therefore, it just sounds like mumbo jumbo. As you get closer, the speech gets clearer and clearer. And if you talk right to my ear, especially my right ear, because that's my better ear, if you put your mouth this close to my ear, I will hear you beautifully, in spite of having, almost a profound hearing loss, because you're close. So the first thing you do is you get close. Another one is you face the person, because if you're not facing them, I can't lip read you. Like, it's interesting for me. I don't want you to talk into my ear, although that's where I would hear the best, because I can't lip read you.
Right.
I got to get you back here so that I can lip read you at the same time, because my brain puts what I see and what I hear together.
Right.
And so I got a good little story in one of my speech reading classes. Andy, he was a farmer, and he was just going out the back door of the kitchen. His little grandson was 5 years old. He said, "Grandpa, can I come with you?" He was just going to do chores around the farm. And his mother said, "Now, you know that Grandpa can't hear. Remember, you've got to look at him before you talk to him." And so here's little Evan staring at Andy's rapidly disappearing back, going out the door. And he says, "But Mommy, I am looking at him." Yeah, they glass, face to face.
Yeah, face to face. Yeah. And usually lighting on the face. So I know a lot of people, the numbers have gone down, luckily, but a lot of people are in the hospital environment right now. And we do have the mask on. But when all that is gone again, then it's better to have the doctor not with their back to the window, because it seems like a lot of them, for some reason, have the desire to stand next to the window, whereas a hard of hearing person or a lip reader can't read their lips with their back to the window. Yeah.
The face goes black, and yeah. I had trouble. I'll tell you a little story. Grade 3.
Okay.
My grade 3 teacher was a little lady, and a thin lady, and in those days, schoolrooms had windows all along one side. I sat in row 3, so if she was along the window side, I'm looking there, and that was south, and so the sun would be backlighting her, and her face would be black. And I didn't know in those days, how to articulate this is a problem. I just knew that that's the way it was. And in the winter, the hot air registers were right up to the bottom of the windows. And being a thin person, I think she got a little cold in the winter. She used to stand there with her bum on the register. Well, that's fine, but I couldn't understand her because the light was against me, and I have to be with my back to the light.
Right.
And that way, the light, if I'm facing the person, the light is on their face, and I can see them, and they don't have to see me because they got good hearing. Now, if you have too hard of hearing people, what you do is you stand at right angles so that you've got a half a face that's lit and a half a face that's darker. But at least you see that way, both of them, that would be assertive coping. You're doing the best for both.
Doing the best for both. I think I heard you say just a moment ago that you have a speech reading class. Did I hear that right?
I used to teach speech reading and coping strategies.
Okay. So do you do that anymore? Or?
If people want me to, but most of it I put in books. So
okay.
But I would if somebody wanted it, because it's so important. And we used to use 2-hour sessions back then. They don't do it now. And the first hour was speech reading, and you can only take so much concentrated effort, because speech reading takes so much effort out of you. And then the second half, we would use various coping strategies. And so we learn both.
Is there some way to tell when somebody is speech reading or lip reading?
They stare at you. My teachers always loved me. They thought I was such a model student because I was always paying attention. I always watched them as they walk around, back and forth. I'm tracking them. That's the only way I could hear.
Only way you can hear.
Yeah, well, I say that that I hear with my eyes.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of the book by Kathleen Buckley. She's a comedian, which you and she have a lot of in common in that regard. But she said, if you could see what I hear, so that's her book. And she has a cochlear implant. And then she, like you, has had hearing loss since the beginning. And she even was run over by a truck because she didn't hear the truck backing up, And I know the deaf for a while wanted to not have the Prius come out because you can't feel or hear the vibration of a Prius when it's backing up. And that's one of the things that most people are not cognitively aware of, that we with hearing loss are also looking at our environment and looking at everything around us to figure out, okay, where's the best place for us to hear? What are the dangers that I'm not hearing, but maybe I can see it, or
Right.
feel
Well,
it.
That's why if you're in a parking lot, you're always watching. If you're walking behind vehicles, you're always watching for backup lights.
Right.
Backup lights go on. You just don't walk in front of that person until you get eye contact with the driver.
Right.
But some people, they treat, especially if they've been normal hearing and then they lose hearing, they're still thinking normal hearing. And so they step off a curb without looking because they forget that they can't hear the cars coming, but before they relied on their ears. I would never, ever do that. I look that way, I look that way, I look that way and that way. And a lot of times I do it twice before I step out because I know I'm not going to hear.
Well, I don't feel so abnormal then because I do the exact same thing. So I've had hearing loss since birth, and I'm always looking behind me to see right now with COVID times if anybody's behind me, because how my whole journey got started and really focusing on hearing loss was I got hit on the ski slopes right around this time for not hearing some person yell to me, I'm behind, I'm on your right. So I didn't hear that. And my concept is we can wear something on us like this little lapel button to let people see the hearing loss that, that are not cognitively aware that we have this disability, and it is an ADA issue, right, that's covered. And especially for those people, like you said, that have been hearing their whole lives. And then suddenly we'll just use the number 50. They've gotten 50 years old or 40 years old, and they've now kind of lost some of their hearing, and they really don't know how to cope with it, So I think your books are absolutely phenomenal on how to help people cope with new hearing loss too. I think you have just one book on that topic, if my memory serves me right, or maybe it doesn't. Do you have one book on that?
Well, the Keys book is the one that has a lot, but this other book called Help, I'm Losing My Hearing, What Do I Do Now?
Okay, so Help, I'm Losing My Hearing, What Do I Do Now? So that one.
What you want to know, because people are, it's just so ingrained in you. Like there's a lady, she went deaf in one ear, and it just happened to be the ear that she'd hold her phone up, because a lot of people, they hold the phone in their left hand because they're right-handed. And so the phone rings, she grabs the phone, holds it up to her ear, hello, there's nobody there, and she hangs up. Never realizes this is the ear that hears now.
I know you we are running a little short on our time. And so I just want to maybe cover one more topic. I don't know if the audience really needs to hear the whole story, but I do want to cover those 4 points on what I will address as assertive listening skills or assertive hearing friendly listening skills. But remember the 4 mile, 2 mile story. And you talked about what you heard and what the other people heard and how it wasn't really clear.
Right.
And the 4 steps people need to do to really make sure that
Right.
they
Yeah.
don't have the hiccup you had.
Oh, it's something that hits all of us. And that is, you tell me something. Let's say you tell me to go to the store and buy milk and cheese and eggs and butter or something. And of course, you know, the standard story is the husband comes home with raisins and chips and everything else, and none of the things he was asked to do. If you want to know that a hard of hearing person has understood you correctly, what you've got to do is ask him to repeat back what he understood you to say, like if you've given him instructions or whatever. So I do that, but let's look at the 4 things. If you tell me to do something and I know I heard you right and I did, well, then there's no problem. I just do what you said and everything's fine. If the number 2 possibility is that I'm not sure that I heard you right. Did you say to get bread or did you say to get lead? I don't know why you want lead, but anyway, you know, because they sound similar. And I'm not sure, so I will ask, did you say this or that? And of course, it's neither one. My wife will always say, no, I was saying this, something totally different. So you do ask. The 3rd possibility is that you hear everything garbled or you don't understand it, you don't have a clue, so you have to ask. Repeat that whole thing. I don't have a clue what you said. But the 4th one is the insidious one. And that's where you know you understood what the person said and you got it all wrong. And I'll give you an example of that. I used to be a volunteer fireman and I actually lived right beside the fire halls, which is very convenient. I was only hard of hearing fireman. And we lived in a small town in central Alberta at the time, and farming community, fields as far as you could see all the way around. Fire alarm goes off. I come flying into the hall. And the chief says, you're driving the water truck because it was a field fire. And I said, where's the fire? And he said, it's 4 miles south and 2 miles east. And I repeated, 4 miles south, 2 miles east. The chief was there, the deputy chief was there, and one of the captains was there. They all heard me repeat. They said, fine. I jump in the truck and I take off. Now, the water truck is a slow-moving vehicle. That one was. I called it a lumbering cow. And I'm not even out of town yet when all the other trucks pass me and away they go. I go 4 miles south and 2 miles east. No sign of any fire trucks, no sign of any smoke, nothing. I try to get on the radio and all I can hear is dip, 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 dip. They were down in a coulee and the radios weren't getting out. I looked behind me about a half a mile and there was a bit of a rise. So I turned the truck around, drove up on the rise, got on the radio again. They could hear me. I said, where are you? They said, where are you? And I said, well, I'm 4 miles south and 2 miles east. And that's when I found out that they had changed the rules and I hadn't repeated it because I didn't know they changed the rules. We always measured distances because we had roads at every 2 miles north and south going east and west and 1 mile east and west going north and south. And so we started at the main road at the intersection that came into town, and that was where we measured from. So I just went 4 miles south, that's 2 roads down, and 2 miles east, nobody there. What they had done in this time, before I got there, they said, it's from the road that's 4 miles south. And so I was precisely where I was supposed to be, except I was 4 miles north. Because I repeated 4 and 2, but they should have said from a different starting point. I just assumed they were using the standard starting point and they never caught it. And so that's how easy it is to mess up communication with not even thinking about it.
Yeah, there's so many variables in communication. And so that's a great story. So really use your assertive skills and say, are we starting at the same starting point if you are somebody who has hearing loss? And if you know for a fact that you're working with somebody or have a relationship with somebody that has hearing loss, then verify what's needed. Or one of my favorite things is I like it written down. I mean, if it's a conversation, you can't write it down, but if it's something as simple as going to the store, then that is written down,
Well,
and
what we should have done, and we did do that after, is they had a map of our area, plexiglass over it, and then dry markers. And the first person in there was supposed to go along and circle where it was. X marks the spot. And then the drivers, when the chief assigned whoever was going to drive whatever truck, they would go there and look at the map, and mentally they would know, they'd see all the roads, and they decide how they're going to get there. And that works fine, but they didn't do it that time.
Well, you were definitely a change maker, and I'm sure you got there in time to save whatever the field was that was on fire.
They were waiting for me.
They were ready. Where is he? Where is he? I know another topic we talked about before, but I'd really like our listeners to hear this. The majority who have hearing loss, especially in over 50, are usually men. And so that's just, I've seen studies that supposedly it's because most men, way back when, a lot of women stayed at home. That's not the case these days. But I'd like to hear how you address the issue of the woman addressing the man with his hearing loss issue, because that was just phenomenal when we met previously, where you told me this is a good way to do it, because women are always struggling with how to address that particular issue.
Well, as we found out in the story of Harry and Betty, it was then that Harry realized that he had the hearing loss, not his wife. So what men don't like to be told that they can't hear, because they know it's a lie, because they can hear. In other words, they're not totally deaf. I mean, even me, I consider myself hearing, although I hear very little, but I'm still hearing. So what happens is the wife says to the husband, you can't hear. I've been talking to you and you haven't heard a thing I've said. And the man says, well, if you'd speak up and quit mumbling, I'd hear you, because I can hear. And the reason for that is that most of the volume of speech comes from low frequency sounds like the vowel sounds and a few consonants. Most of the intelligibility of speech comes from the high frequency sounds, which are softer sounds. And as I said before, that's where you start losing your hearing in the high frequency. So they're softer, so you don't have to lose much hearing, and you already don't hear them. So a man, if he's talking to other men and so on, he hears their voices because they're loud sounds. So of course he can hear. He's hearing them. Doesn't understand what they're saying, but that's another issue. And especially in a crowded situation where there's other background noise. If it's quiet, he can hear it. So what I tell the ladies to do is, you don't say to your husband or your man in your life, you can't hear. You say, I've noticed that you have trouble hearing in noise, and he'll agree. It's trouble hearing. It's not that he can't hear. And then you can go along and segue into, if you got a hearing aid that would pick up the high frequency sounds, then you would understand people. So you don't talk about hearing loss, it's about understanding. Because as soon as you increase the high frequencies, your understanding goes up. So
well, that's phenomenal. That's really good. That's an easy way to understand it and for women to approach it. I know there was one woman that she had hearing loss, and her daughter simply told her, well, you can't babysit your granddaughter until you get hearing aids. So woman to woman, she just labeled it right there. I mean, she said, you can't do any grandbaby duty except if you get hearing aids.
Say hot diggity.
Well, depends on which side of the fence you're on there.
Yeah, but you see, I can't wear hearing aids around kids, because when they scream, it hurts terribly. I
Yeah.
have to take my hearing aids off. Then I can stand any screaming, it doesn't matter. But
Right.
because the hearing aids amplify too much of the wrong stuff.
Right.
That's just the way my ears are and hearing aids are. So I would take them off. That'd be the first thing I would do.
You couldn't go to an audiologist and have them tune down that particular part, because I know I had some that were quite old. They were almost 8 years old. And I went to a Bible study class, and that particular man's tone was so low, the leader, I couldn't, I mean, I could lip read what he was saying all day long because I've been doing it like you have since childhood. But it's the kind of thing that I couldn't hear what he was saying. So I thought, okay, so I went back to that same audiologist. And that's one reason why hearing aids sometimes are so expensive. It's because as long as you own that hearing aid, you can go back to that audiologist and get him or her to fine tune them. So I told the person what the problem was, and then they adjusted it. They had to adjust it 3 different times for me where I could hear that man. And, but at the same time, they did adjust it. And so have you ever tried that or thought about that?
Well, of course, I do
Okay,
that.
well,
In fact, I go there and I let them I get them to let me adjust my own hearing aids so they're exactly. But you see, the problem is hearing aids have a dynamic range, and let's just say it's that big.
right.
And if my dynamic range is a lot less, you can't compress the hearing aid into mine. So the hearing aids are
Oh,
physically not able to accommodate my hearing loss.
your hearing loss.
Most people with mild and moderate loss is not a problem.
Right.
Once you start getting into severe and profound, you're in trouble.
Good to
And
know.
so that's, so what I do is I wear hearing aids in relative quiet, and they work well. I'm not saying they don't. I still don't hear people, especially if I'm in a group, and some people talk louder and some people talk softer, like in my own family. Some of them are very loud and loud guffaws and all the rest of it. Well, I got to keep the volume down so that that doesn't hurt too bad.
Right.
And the people that talk soft, there's my pass band, and if their voice is down here, I don't hear a sound. They've got to bring it up to there. So if I turn my hearing aids to bring theirs into there, then these guys are far too loud. And that's where I say dynamic range is the important thing. So if I could have a hearing aid that would take the dynamic range down to almost nothing, of course, if it was down to zero, all you would hear would be a simple tone. There would be
Right.
no inflection in it. And so that is the problem. And so I find it very difficult. Other people, they put their hearing aids on and they hear everything wonderful. I could be jealous of that, but I just know they just have their kind of hearing. I have mine. And
That's just the way life is, so it makes each one of us unique. Well, I'm going to advise my listeners not to do any adjustment on their hearing aids, to go to somebody to get it done. But I do admire you for being able to do that. And perhaps another time we'll talk about your hearing aid museum. And I might not have that name right, but I know you have a lot of
precisely.
hearing aids, and I know that there are a lot of people that have a great interest in different ones. And it's the kind of thing that we have come a long way, baby, in reference to the hearing horns and all the other things that used to be out. And I personally am proud when I walk, say, at Costco, and I look down the aisle and I see several people wearing the over-the-ear hearing aids behind their ears, because I think, okay, they're really doing what they need to do to keep their body healthy, because it can be a health issue if you're supposed to wear hearing aids and you don't. Then it can cause all kinds of isolation and depression and heart problems and diabetes, and even a couple people have committed suicide, due to that. And so it's the kind of thing that, it's important to wear your hearing aids when you're supposed to wear them.
And if they work for you.
Yeah, and if they work for you, very, very good. I like that,
And
Dr.
if
Neal.
they don't, then you use things like here's my FM transmitter and receiver. I can use those. My favorite one is my pocket talker.
So what is that, a pocket talker? And what's the FM receivers? I haven't heard of those.
Well, FM, the one with the 3 rows of buttons here
Okay.
is the transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could put that one on if I wanted to. For example, I could just clip this. I'm left-handed. Put it on this way. If I turned it on, and let's say I say you clipped it onto your sweater like that, and it's turned on, and I would use earbuds or a neck loop in here if I was wearing my hearing aids, and I will hear your voice, and this one will transmit about 150 feet. So, I mean, we could be riding bicycles and I would hear you beautifully, and you can't hear me unless you've got normal hearing.
Okay.
So-
So it's
so-
just,
so
so an
these are-
FM receiver.
Yeah. So this, I mean, they're just little things like this. As you see, you don't even need an external mic. Now this one does have an external mic built in. So does this one. This one, the receiver can act as a pocket talker, but this one I can, I got the wrong one, but I can plug in an external mic and just have it. So you'd have a lapel mic or something, and this could be on your belt or in your pocket. So I use whatever works in the situation that I'm in.
And what was that other one that you had, the white one that had the loop around it? What is that?
This one is let's get them right. That's a pocket talker.
Oh, pocket talker. Okay. I will
Yeah.
have that in show notes for everyone. So,
Yeah. Let's see if I can see. I can't see because the picture is so small, but there it says pocket talker.
pocket talker. Okay.
Yeah.
And
This one, I use that. Think of it as an old hearing aid,
Okay.
like the 50s hearing aids. It's just a straight analog amplifier, and ever so many elderly people. Now, you see, we're just getting older, but we're not elderly. Elderly is always somewhere.
That's right. Forever young.
So elderly people, for some reason, numbers of them don't like digital hearing aids. They just don't sound good to them. And so a pocket talker being analog, it sounds natural. And so they will wear it and understand. You should see people's eyes get big as they realize how well they can hear. So like with a pocket talker, if I'm in the car with my wife, I can put it in the cup holder between us, and I put earbuds on, and I have the microphone, and my wife clips the mic on, and I can hear her beautifully. And that works for me. We go into a noisy restaurant. She's sitting opposite me. I just stick it in the middle of the table. Mic runs over to her, earbuds run over to me, and I can hear her.
So how do you do it when you're in a group situation, say at a restaurant?
I don't.
Oh, you don't?
What I do, there, let me grab another one of my, okay, shotgun mic.
A shotgun mic. Okay.
See, very, very directional.
Okay.
And I plug this into my pocket talker, and then I just aim it at whoever's talking.
Wow, that's pretty neat. Yeah.
Because it's very directional.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do, just aim it.
A shotgun. Okay.
Yeah, that's what they call a shotgun mic. And it's sort of funny. We go into a restaurant, and the waitress comes around. You know, if I'm using the pocket talker, how do I tell her, don't talk to me, talk to my wife, because that's where the mic is.
Right.
But I lip read all the time anyway, so I use the terms lip reading and speech reading interchangeably, just because I'm an old goat and I started out lip reading.
Yeah.
But
Well,
really,
it's the kind of thing that we now have a lot of body language books, which is nothing more than speech reading. But back in our day, we didn't really have a lot of that. But it's now come about, you know, where more people are cognitively aware that, and I've forgotten what the numbers are right now off the top of my head, but I think it's something like 80% of our communication is done with speech or body language, whereas to only about 25, or it's a low number, is done actually with auditory listening.
Yeah, but there's one thing you got to watch with that. People are using those figures wrongly.
Okay.
they say that, let's just say it was 80 and 20, because I don't think it's very wrong
Okay.
from there. But they say that communication, 80% of communication is body language, but that's not true. It's 80% of what we communicate about our emotions, our feelings, and so on is body language. If I was talking to you about astrophysics, just pick some dumb subject that nobody knows much about, and everything that I communicate to you is going to be 100% speech. It's not going to be body language. But if we're talking emotions, that is communicated by body language.
Well, thanks for that clarification. I appreciate that.
People miss that in the.
So I'm going to touch on a personal topic, but we're going to take just a short break to make sure we get this in. So I do want to thank Hear Communication is our sponsor today, and I do want to thank Dr. Neil for being on the podcast. We will also have this in YouTube, so therefore you can see us, and you can also see the shotgun mic, and you can see the FM receivers and see all of that. But I do want to thank you. But how can people reach you, Dr. Neil?
It's very simple. Well, if you know how to spell my name, you're going to find me on the internet. There's only two of us that take up 95% of the internet, and the other one is a computer programmer. But all you have to do is remember Hearing Loss Help. You've got hearingloshelp.com. That's the website. My name, address, phone number, everything is at the bottom of every page on it. And my personal email address is just neil@hearingloshelp.com. So just remember, my name is spelled Neil. As long as you got that.
Can you do that in international coding?
Yeah. The reason we want to do that, the reason pilots and the military use international phonetics is because there's no two syllables that sound the same with one exception. So I'd say I spell Neil, November, Echo, India, Lima. And that way, if you know, if it's a 3-syllable word, you know, it's going to be, it could be November. If all you ever heard was the sound burr, you know, right away it's an N, because it's going to be burr of November. If it was an O, you heard a cur instead of a burr, well, then you know it's an O, it's Oscar. And if you hear a Lu, it's not an L, it's Zulu, it's a Z, or as we say in Canada, Z. And so that's how you make sure you never get it wrong, because when people talk to me on the phone where I can't lip read, I don't have a clue what letters they're spelling. They spell things out, and I don't have a clue what it is. Oh, and I want to tell you one thing just before. I've got a big box sitting right here beside me. A man came to the door yesterday and dumped off this big box, probably has 100, 150 hearing aids in it.
Wow.
And although I do have the second largest hearing aid museum in the world, it still had quite a few ones that I'd never had. And in it, I discovered the very first in-the-ear hearing aid ever made.
And who was that done by?
It was a Dahlberg, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay.
In 1955. But I have the very first vacuum tube hearing aid ever made. I've got the very first transistor hearing aid ever made. I've got the very first behind the ear one ever made. I've got the very first in the ear. They call it at the ear because it was the old style where you had the hard ear molds. So the ear mold is technically in your ear, and this snaps right onto the ear mold. So it's right there. And I've got the very first digital hearing aid ever made that came out 10 years before the digital hearing aids came out. So we got lots of.
And do you have those on your website so people can see them?
A lot of them. I'm only about 50% done.
Okay. Well, I just thought for those people that have an interest in that, to see how far we've come, or maybe some student that's doing their thesis on this, then you'd be a great person to contact, you know, because feel like one day we will have some sort of hearing aid where it won't even be, it'll be just a little chip. You know,
Yeah, and embedded, and we'll never see it. So then we have to see these. Now,
right,
if
right.
you want to look at the Hearing Aid Museum, it's just hearingaidmuseum.com. Or if you go to the hearinglosthelp.com website, second button over says museum.